Welcome to the 2013 Expository Writing Calibration Instructions PowerPoint presentation. My name is Maureen Ucles, and I'll be working with you today, going over the different instructions and things you need to know to fully train teachers in the expository writing, rubric, and calibration. Where do I get my resources? If you've come to download this PowerPoint, then you've received a link and you're here. It was placed in the iCoach newsletter. What I want to talk to you about is the order of the presentation and to show you where some of these documents are. I'm going to go to the box. And as you come here, you'll see that there's Star Writing Rubric Resources. There's a rubric in English and in Spanish. And you come over here, you'll see the scoring guide English and Spanish if you click open into those folders. If you go to the study of the rubric with the scoring guide samples, you will see a PowerPoint, as well as there will also be uploaded a digital presentation. There is also writing samples to discuss for the calibration, as well as a PowerPoint and something digital that go along with it. The important, start with the first instructions. And so this is what I'm talking to you about now. But in the order of presentation, when you're considering looking through all these folders, it would be best to start with a study of the rubric and a scoring guide. Go through that first, watch the digital part, and then it will help you decide, well, if you want to do the presentation yourself or follow and view the presentation that is given to you in a digital file. Then there's a PowerPoint also in this folder, and it will give you some samples that the teachers and the people who are going through the training will go through and try to figure out if their calibration is close enough. File in there as well as a PowerPoint. It's up to you to decide. It's up to you to decide if you want to watch the digital file or if you want to watch it and then share it with the teachers or do it yourself afterwards. So there will also be a PowerPoint that will be provided. So I'm going to click out of that. I'm going to come back and I am going to go back to the PowerPoint that we were discussing. So that's the order. First you want to go through the rubric, then you want to go through the calibration with sample papers. And it's up to you to decide how you want to do it, whether or not you want to view it with the teachers, the digital file, or just do the presentation with the PowerPoint. The resources are all in the box. And who should be trained? Anyone that's going to go over and score these papers must be trained on the rubric and the calibration. They may be your team members, they may be interventionists, they may be other people involved like principals and APs and people like that. Need to go through be calibrated. And why is that? Well, there are various reasons why that should happen. Number one, everyone should be calibrated every year before they begin to do this. I've been doing this for 23 years, and every time I need to go back to the rubric, I need to see those samples, I need to refresh my mind and put myself into it. Is highly recommended and suggested that anybody who is going to score those papers, that they should go through this training with you. And they might ask you why. Well, there's many reasons why. We have to refresh our mind, we have to be speaking with a common vocabulary, and we have to use the holistic scoring model from the rubric. And that requires a lot of discussion, it requires a lot of reviewing and viewing new writing samples just to get our minds ready to do this. It takes a while. It's not that you'll remember from last year, because sometimes we grade too hard, sometimes we grade too easy, sometimes we put more emphasis on this and that and the other. Well, to have that commonality, that's why we have this training every year. What is the process? Well, the teachers are going to assess their students using the Spring Branch Expository Writing Benchmark. They will take a writing sample. They will have 12 multiple choice questions. Now, after receiving the rubric calibration training, which includes the rubric as well as some sample papers, after receiving the rubric calibration training, teachers will score the writing sample using the Texas Education Expository Writing Rubric, which is provided for you in the box. Each teacher of language arts will score their own class samples. Now I say language arts because some people are self-contained, and that means they would be a language arts teacher, or they're departmentalized. We want those teachers to score their own class papers. Who else will be scoring? Because we're going to have the adjacent scoring model in place. Or whoever else is trained, then they will be that second person, and the team determines that. It could be another team member, it could be an interventionist, it could be the eye coach, it could be anybody else who's a part of that training, who is going through that training. Those two scores will be combined, and they will be placed in Eduphoria by December 20th. Now, how does it work? Well, if there's no more than 1 point, if there is no more than 1 point scoring discrepancy, then the combination or adjacent score will be entered in Eduphoria. What happens if there's 2 or more points of scoring discrepancy? What happens? Well, let's talk about what does that mean first, just to refresh your memory, because we've done this before, but sometimes it's good to go over it again. If a student has a score 0.4 and I am a scorer 1 and scorer 2 gives them a score 0.3, 4 minus 3, 1 point discrepancy. No problem, because that's the way TEA does it. What happens if scorer 1 gives them a 4 and scorer 2 gives them a 2? 4 minus 2, 2 point discrepancy. 2 or more point discrepancy, something else has to happen. And what we're going to do is we want another person, an alternative person, to score this. It could be an eye coach, another team member, team leader, another staff member, someone else that is considered an expert, has a lot of experience with this, scores it. Once they score it, they just multiply it by 2, they double the score, and that is the final score for that student. If there is a scoring discrepancy of 2 or more. If it's 1, that's fine. So the writing sample score will be entered in Eduphoria as number 13 in Eduphoria on the answer document. And it will be combined to closely mimic the Texas Education Agency's formula for the STAR writing test. STAR writing and the SBIC benchmark was broken down very similarly. 36% of the test comes from the composition pieces. This is from the state. 64% comes from the multiple choice, those 28 questions. So at the state breaks it up in this way. 36% of the test comes from the expository and personal narrative. And then there are 28 multiple choice questions. Those together give you 100%. And so we are trying to mimic it the same way, very similarly, for one scoring sample. And then when we do the practice STAR, we'll go back to the way TEA does it for the 2 compositions and the 28 questions. But this test, we're trying to mimic it. So 40% of the test will come from the composition piece, the expository piece. 60% of the test comes from the 12 multiple choice questions. Now, how does this formula work and everything? Well, that's an Ann Kuchera question, because I don't know. I know that she has made it so that it will work on a 40-60 model, but I don't know how all those numbers work out. But so if you have a question about specifically how does that work, please email Ann Kuchera. So, raw score conversion scale, I want you to keep this in mind. When we talk about the raw score conversion, we're talking about 2 samples, 2 writing samples for TEA and 28 questions. Now, but when you bring them over to percentages, this is what it looks like. And since we're in phase 1, this is what it will be this year. So whenever you get the scores back, look at the overall percentages and see how they did. If a child receives a combination score of 52 to 80%, the combination score meaning the composition with the multiple choice, if they receive a 52% to 80% score, combined score, that child will be in the satisfactory achievement level. If they're at 82% to 100%, they will be considered advanced achievement level. Now, of course, if they're at 50 or below, that will be considered unsatisfactory. So keep these numbers in mind when you're looking at the data. Okay, so what's the time frame? Started Monday, December 2nd, and it goes until December 13th to actually take the writing sample. The final date for teachers to enter their scores in Eduphoria is December 20th. So they have a week afterwards to score them together, and from now until then, there will be time for training. What are the options for you, the eye coach? Well, You will use the digital files to train teachers and staff. That's one model, such as after school or during staff development time or some other time that you've decided that you want to use as a campus. So you have the digital file, you watch it together, you pause it, you have these collaborative conversations, and then you go on to the calibration where you're given 6 samples, and then you have that conversation. Then they're ready to score their own. All right, that's one way. Another model is that the iCoaches watches the digital training files previously and then decides to train them just using the PowerPoints and the additional materials. A third model is you might want to front load it to where the teachers watch the rubric training, or have the teachers watch the rubric trainings together, and then when they're going to go over to see 6 pieces additionally to see how they did, if their calibration is, if they understand it correctly, that might be done digitally or with them. It's up to the campus to decide how that works. Of course, the best model is the iCoach being there with the teachers having these collaborative conversations, but we know there are time constraints, so some of these things can be flipped. We just want to make sure that everybody receives the quality training that they need. So decide what's appropriate, one of these 3 models for your campus. It could be a combination. If you have any questions, let me know. My email is maureen.ucles@springbrancisd.com. My cell phone, 832-606-2543. You may text me on my cell phone. I have unlimited text, and it's not a problem. So if you have any questions, let me know, and I will try to get the information to you as soon as I possibly can. Thank you so much for working with the teachers and calibrating with them. I appreciate it, and happy calibration.